Lansing's only sports station. The Game, 7:30.
Let's play.
And a good Saturday morning out there to everyone. This is the season premiere of High School Rewind here on the Game, 7:30 a.m. WVFN and the Lansing Sports Network. This is the weekly show that recapped the week that was in high school basketball around the mid-Michigan area. For this week, it'll be boys only because the girls' season hasn't started yet. That starts on Monday. As the schedule is flipped this year, the boys start a week earlier than the girls do. This show and everything high school related is brought to you by Doubting Industries, the title sponsor this season. We thank Jeff and Chris Metz for sponsoring us all season long, all the game coverage and this very show, High School Rewind. If you're wondering what your future holds and you're not going to college or you found out college isn't for you, check out the future that skilled trades can offer you. You'll be surprised. Check them out at doubtingindustries.com. And of course, the Lansing Sports Commission. No matter the sport, the Lansing Sports Commission can make your next event your best event. Plan on something greater. Find out more at lansingsports.org. Well, the boys' season is now underway, and we've got some top teams, got some top teams that are state contenders once again. And we saw one, Erik Doc Love, my broadcast partner, who'll be coming up talking with me here on this show in about 15 minutes or so. We saw one last night, East Lansing. They were quarterfinalists last year before losing to Muskegon over at Caledonia High School, but they got their season off with a bang, taking care of Lansing Catholic on the road 67-15. Cam Hudson led the way for them with 19 points and 7 rebounds. J.L. Branson was outstanding as well, 15 of his 18 points in the first half. And the Okemos transfer, K.J. Torbert, he had 13 points and 4 rebounds. Coach Ray Mitchell has a very good squad, and they looked really, really strong last night. The pressure, the defensive pressure that they used really flummoxed Lansing Catholic all game long. Really in the first half, got out to a huge lead and was able to make it even bigger than that in the second half. They've been pointing to this year. 8 of their top 10 guys were back from last year's quarterfinal team. So if anybody was going to make a big run, or if there was going to be a year where East Lansing was going to make a big run, this was going to be it. And man, what a great performance last night. We'll also talk with Brian Calloway, the prep sports editor of the Lansing State Journal, LSJ.com, and get his thoughts on that game, as well as the other games around the mid-Michigan area. In case you hadn't heard from last night, you didn't stay up to watch the late local news, here are the area scores from last night. DeWitt is now 2-0 on the season. They took care of St. John's 50-34 last night. Adam Flannery, the coach's son, he had 17 points and 5 assists to lead the Panthers. They're off to a 2-0 start. Moving on here, Waverly defeated Detroit Martin Luther King in one of those preseason invitationals. That was a close one, 58-57. Derek Thomas II had 20 points. And Deontay Pfeiffer, who's one of the better players in the area, he added 16. I thank Waverly statman Vince Perkins for sending me that information. They were playing down in the Detroit area. That's a very good win for Coach Rod Watts and his staff. They're off to a 1-0 start. Some other games from last night. Okemos took care of Williamston 42-26. That was at Williamston. A lot of people, myself included, thought Okemos, maybe not be as good as they were last year because of the loss of the freshman big man, Joey Smith, who decided to transfer to the Detroit area, and I believe Birmingham or Bloomfield Hills' brother Rice. And, of course, K.J. Torbert, who transferred from Okemos to East Lansing. But, hey, they're off to a good start. They are 2-0 on the season as they were victorious. Grand Ledge went up north. Yes, up north. They went up to Petoskey and defeated the homestanding Petoskey Northmen. They won that game 56-45, and they will play in the championship game of that tournament that's going on up there this afternoon as they are playing. They're playing Freeland today. Elijah Hendricks, who was in and out of the lineup last year for Coach Luke Charter, he was outstanding. 28 points. Wow. One of the best performances of the week for anybody. And Braden James, 9 points, 15 rebounds. Grand Ledge, 2-0 on the season, looking to get to 3-0 with a victory today. Eastern off to a decent start. They took care of Eaton Rapids. They're 1-1 on the season. They beat Eaton Rapids last night, 77 to 57. Again, the Quakers are 1-1. Miles Edmond, 26 points and 9 rebounds. Charlotte, a lot of people like Charlotte in the CAAC White this season. They won the league last year. They have Cutler Brandt amongst other players back last year. From last year. Malachi Garza, 19 points. Cutler Brandt, 13 points. Ben Buzzard, another double-double, 10 points and 10 rebounds. Ionia was able to defeat Greenville last night, 72 to 62. Stockbridge over Olivet, 54 to 44. Stockbridge is off to a 2-1 start this season. They were down 12-0 in this game. Down 12-0. Probably had to call a timeout or two to try to get everything on the right side of the ledger. Keegan Collins led the Panthers with 19 points. Joey Balla added 11. Dansville got a victory. They defeated Leslie last night, 49 to 35. Dansville, 21-3 run in the second quarter. They were able to win. Drew France, 23 points. Calvin Van Hartsveld had 13 for the Aggies. Perry took care of Byron, 66 to 26. Tristan Krupp, 23 points. DJ Jenks, 21 points to lead the Ramblers. Powama Westphalia over Saginaw Nouvelle, 66 to 46. That PW off to a 1-0 start. They've got one of the better players in the area as well in Grady Eklund, who is just a sophomore this year. He had a terrific year as a freshman last year. 27 points to lead them to the win. Lane Treeweiler added 11. Cash Pohl added 10 as well. Potterville over Weberville last night, 58 to 48. And Potterville off to a good start on the season. It's been a struggle for them in a lot of different sports. And Caleb Batteram, 16 points to lead the Vikings in the victory. Vermontville, Maple Valley. Maple Valley, the only team in the area that is 3-0. They played 3 games this week, and they were victorious over Saranac. That was a 57 to 44 score. Aiden Wilkes, 19 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists for Maple Valley. They were victorious in that one. Portland St. Pat's lost to the capital area homeschoolers, 50 to 34. Ovid Elsie, 56 Owasso, 31. And moving on, New Lothrop over Morris, 32 to 30. Fowler lost to Sparta, 69-51. And Hazlitt fell to Walled Lake Western, 68 to 62. Those were the games from last night. Taking a look at the action from Tuesday. Man, a lot of close games on opening night on Tuesday. It was opening night for most of the teams on Tuesday. And, Holt defeated Sexton by 3 points in a game that went right down to the wire. And congratulations to Holt for winning that one. That was the first game for both new head coaches, Muhammad Alamin for Holt and DeLeon Deering for Sexton. Danye Thomas, a double-double in that game. He had 12 points and 11 rebounds. But the thing that really stuck out to me, and we'll talk about this with Erik Doc Love and then Brian Calloway later on, all the overtime games that we had. There were like 4 or 5 overtime games. Fowlerville beat Charlotte in overtime on Tuesday, 66 to 64. Moving on, Weberville beat Whitmore Lake in overtime, 55 to 54. Leslie beat Springport, 45-42. And Lakewood fell to Plainwell, 53 to 47. There were 4 overtime games and lots of other close games around the mid-Michigan area. Ovid Elsie fell to Burton Genesee Christian, 47-41. In a close game. Bath lost to Brighton Sherrill Stockwell Academy by 8, 63 to 55. Maple Valley beat Delton Kellogg, 55 to 48 to get things started. Clare defeated Alma, 54-51. Stockbridge lost to Napoleon, 50 to 43. So, a lot of close games around the mid-Michigan area. Really something that really stuck out to me from opening night. We'll talk about all of that with Brian Calloway, the prep sports editor of the Lansing State Journal, LSJ.com. And we'll also talk with Erik Doc Love, my broadcast partner. We did the East Lansing and Lansing Catholic game last night. So impressive. East Lansing using various full court pressures, mostly 2-2-1, full court zone press. Just completely messed up Lansing Catholic offensively. Turnover after turnover, an easy basket after easy basket. And then they changed it up a little bit, a 1-2-2 press. And both were very effective. You know what was really also refreshing of that game last night? East Lansing went 13 of 14 from the free throw line. 13 of 14 from the free throw line. Made all but one of their free throws. And that's always good to see because time after time I see teams that just cannot make free throws in game situations. And that's going to hurt teams. Heading up later on in the season and into the state tournament in March. And it's going to be even more so because of the new foul rule that is in the Michigan High School Athletic Association, taking the direction of the National Federation, the NFHS, National Federation of High Schools. The rule now, no more 1-and-1s, no more 7 fouls and a half, and you get a 1-and-1, and then 10 fouls, you get 2 free throws. It's now 5 fouls per quarter. It's exactly the same rule as in women's college basketball, 5 fouls per quarter because they play 4 10-minute quarters. And similar to the NBA rule where they have 5 fouls per 12-minute quarter. But the rule isn't exactly the same. Offensive fouls don't count as team fouls. And I don't think loose ball fouls that they have in the NBA, those don't count either. But a similar rule, I mean, 1 game, 1 week isn't going to, you need more of a... what's the word I'm looking for? You need to see more games to make any kind of judgment to see whether this is a good rule or not. I think they're trying to make it more of a penalty because, maybe 1-and-1 isn't a penalty because if you miss the first free throw, you don't get the second one. Maybe with this rule, you get when you get 2 free throws on the 5th foul, make it tougher for teams to come back in the 4th quarter, make it more of a penalty to commit more fouls. Teams can get in the bonus very, very early, and you can shoot a lot of free throws. Like you see in a lot of NBA games where teams get into the bonus early in the 4th quarter, and then they just shoot free throws for the rest of the game. You'll see that. You'll see teams take it to the basket a heck of a lot more in the 4th quarter, and then, where you can get to the free throw line pretty quickly. But again, you got to see more games and to get a full judgment on that. East Lansing was a little bit sloppy last night. It was their first game of the season, so that's somewhat understandable. I was a little bit critical of some of the mistakes they were making, but a lot of their players played football, and they just got done a couple of weeks ago with football. Majority of their roster were football players, so you can kind of understand some of the mistakes that they were making there. Taking a look at, not everybody started this week. Mason did not play this week, and neither did Everett. Neither of those teams played a game this week. Mason, of course, coming off the state title run, probably smartly, Coach Lee Chaney probably smartly doing their schedule that way to allow his team, again, just like East Lansing, majority of the team were football players, just got done making a long run in the state playoffs. They, getting reacclimated from football to basketball, probably a good idea to start their season a week late. And remember, Mason is one of those schools that's benefiting from the 22 games in the regular season because they now host their own tournament. They host the Mason Holiday Tournament, which will be right around Christmas time, and we'll talk more about that coming up, later on this program. What is this program? It's High School Rewind. It's the weekly show that recaps the week that was in boys, and next week, girls basketball. And we'll talk a lot more about the girls next week. I mean, the top team in the area, at least going into the season, is Coach Casey Reed's Lansing Catholic Cougars. Just like East Lansing, most of the team is back. I believe 10 of their top 12 players are back from last year's, or 10 of their 13 players, top 13 players back from last year, led by the Richards twins, Leah and Anna. So we'll talk more about them coming up next week. We may talk with Coach Casey Reed next week, talk about her team coming up this season. But right now we got to get to a break because we have Erik Doc Love, my broadcast partner, coming up here on the other side of this break, getting his thoughts about the game last night and his thoughts about some of the other action from this week. It's all coming up on Dowding Industries' presentation of High School Rewind here on the game 730 AM WVFN and the Lansing Sports Network. Back after this break.
Sure, you could listen to static.
Or you could get the free Game 730 AM mobile app in your app store today and listen longer.
Without the interruptions from the static.
Listen live to all your favorite moments in sports and hear all the action. The Game 730 AM app also has tons of great restaurant deals for you. It's waiting for you right now in the app store today. The Game 730 AM app is powered by Driven Collision. We make friends by accident. Apply. From the Breslin Center to Little Caesars Arena, we've got the sports opinions that matter to you. From the Driven Collision Studios, we make friends by accident. On the Game 730 AM.
Oh, welcome back to High School Rewind on the game 730 AM WVFN and the Lansing Sports Network. Brought to you by Jeff and Chris Metz, Dowding Industries, as well as the Lansing Sports Commission. Happy to be joined now by my broadcast partner, Erik Doc Love. He and I called the East Lansing at Lansing Catholic game last night. It was all East Lansing. They won it 67-15. And Erik joins me on the show via telephone. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Brock. Thanks for having me on the show.
Well, and we'll be having you on a lot more during the season as well, probably right around the holidays as well, as we'll kind of get a month in review, either the December 23rd or December 30th show, or maybe both. Who the heck knows? But the game we did last night.
You're going to put me to work, aren't you?
Huh?
You're going to put me to work, aren't you?
Don't worry, I'll pay you. But East Lansing, we thought, most people thought it was East Lansing 1, Mason 2, top two teams heading into the season, just simply because of the players that are coming back. We haven't seen Mason yet. We might next week. They didn't start their season this week, but man, East Lansing sure did. And man, very, very impressive. The full court pressure, the various full court pressures really messed up Lansing Catholic, and East Lansing showed why a lot of people really like them last night.
Yeah, I mean, they got a lot of guys coming back, and then when you add the transfer in from Okemos, KJ Torbert, you make a really good team even that much better. And East Lansing was phenomenal last night. And, the story of the game really was the defensive pressure from the Trojans, whether it be a full-court press, or whether it be the half-court trap, whatever it is that they threw out there against the Cougars last night. It was quite effective and led to a lot of fast break opportunities for East Lansing, and that big three-headed monster, if you want to call it, for the Trojans with Cam Hudson, KJ Torbert, and J.L. Branson. They shone out last night, that's for sure. Yeah,
definitely. And you know what? A packed gymnasium. That was really surprising. That's a very intimate gym at Lansing Catholic. They've made a lot of improvements to it, but still very intimate, and it was absolutely jam-packed. And, Lansing Catholic draws very well, but a lot of people were there to see East Lansing and just, so impressed with their athleticism. And I mentioned it in the last segment, Erik. How about making all your free throws? They were 13 of 14 from the free throw line. That's impressive. How many times do you and I see these high school teams who just cannot make free throws in key situations or just in regular game situations?
That happens more often than not. And East Lansing, they were 13 for 13. They missed their last one, actually. One and one situation. So, they've you don't see that very often. You love to see that, especially early in the season, a first game for East Lansing, and a squad goes out there and makes almost every single free throw out there, and it's quite impressive to be able to do that. And hopefully we'll see a little bit more of that this season with the teams making their free throws instead of those missed opportunities. Maybe with the 1-and-1 going away, we'll see a few more makes. I don't know. It's a possibility.
Which leads me to the next question. Yes, the main rule change this year in high school basketball, taking their direction from the National Federation of High Schools, the MHSA has adopted the quarter fouls rule, where you get to 5 fouls in a quarter, and then you're in the bonus, and it's 2 free throws from there. It is the same rule that's used in women's college basketball now because they play 4 10-minute quarters, and now it's similar to the rule that's in the NBA, although their rule is just a little bit different. But one game or 1 week really doesn't give you an idea of how this rule is going to work. Still kind of a work in progress. Interesting that they're doing this. Your thoughts on the rule change?
I'm torn a little bit. I like the rule change as far as I like things. I like change when it comes into sports in general. Things. For the most part, when they make changes, it's a good thing. You're leading towards something that. Something needed to be changed, and they worked on it, and they find a better solution for it. So, the one-to-one opportunities in the past, it was beneficial to some teams, and then it was harmful to others, obviously, depending upon how well your team shot the ball. I liked the chance that, if the team was down late and, they got to the 1-and-1, if they made the first one, then, they get the second opportunity to make the second one. So that would help them kind of come back, or if maybe you missed the first one, you would get a rebound and you get a chance to, run your offense again. But, the 5 foul rule and the straight 2 free throws is good. I like it. I like the change this year. I think it's going to work out well. I think it's more beneficial than, the 1-and-1 has been. I'm going to miss some of those chances, obviously, and some other teams are too when they need them late in ball games potentially, but I'm in favor of it. And obviously, we're only a weekend. There's only been, a couple games so far. But I think that overall, I think the teams are going to like it.
Well, it's certainly going to benefit the team that's ahead at the end of the game. Mm-hmm. If you're up by 4 or 5 points and you got less than 2 minutes to go, it's going to benefit you because if you miss the first free throw and you're in the 1-and-1, you give the other team a chance to get the ball, and they can come down and score quickly and, get back in the game or potentially tie or take the lead. With this rule change, that doesn't happen. I think it benefits the team that leads, and it's going to be tougher for teams to a little bit tougher anyway for teams to come back. But you know what? Maybe not, because the way we see some of these high school teams shoot free throws, maybe it won't make any difference either way.
Yeah, it could be a total wash. You're right. It is. It does benefit the teams that are up late in ball games in a tight one, but maybe it could, maybe they don't shoot very well as a team overall. Maybe and then you're scouting ahead of time. Maybe some of the guys that aren't going to be playing or shooting as well, and you follow them because you're pretty sure they're going to at least miss one of them. So yeah, it does help the teams that are winning at late in the ball game, but it might balance out in the end. You never know.
Yeah, let's give this a few more games. At least maybe give it to the first of the year and then maybe make a better judgment there. Erik, taking a look at some of the action from this week, some surprises, I should say. Grand Ledge lost Teddy Williams, who was a great player, who's now at Army now playing football there. First Grand Ledge athlete or student anyway to get into West Point. That's pretty awesome. And he had a 4.3 GPA, and he was able to get into West Point. But they lost him. But Grand Ledge is off to a good start. They're 2-0 on the season. They won the semifinal against Petoskey in the Petoskey tournament up north last night, and they'll play this afternoon against Freeland. Elijah Hendricks, who we saw off and on last year, big-time performance, 28 points for the Comets and Coach Luke Charter.
Yeah, the Comets are looking well early on, and losing Teddy Williams obviously, that hurts that squad. But a lot of guys coming back, and a young sophomore as well who's supposed to step up and play real well. Braden James, I believe his name is.
Yeah,
and they're early 2-0. They were picked to maybe be second or third in the CAAC Blue behind East Lansing. So the Comets and Trojans games will be competitive. I can guarantee that, but. For Grand Ledge, I'm not surprised that they come off to a good start here early on and playing well. And I think that it's one of those teams that could win a district title themselves later on in the season.
DeWitt and Okemos are 2-0 on the season. That's a bit of a surprise because DeWitt lost one of the best players they've ever had there in Bryce Kearns, and yet they're off to a good start, 2-0. But what's really surprising is Okemos. Okemos lost their 2 best players. They lost Smith, the big guy who transferred to Birmingham or Bloomfield Hills, Brother Rice, and KJ Torbert transferred from Okemos to East Lansing. And yet, Coach Jeff Wange has them out to a 2-0 start. Your thoughts on Okemos and DeWitt?
Yeah, for the Wolves, that's tough losing them. They also had another guy transfer out of the school, too, another guy who was a part of that squad and left Coach Jeff Wange's team. So yeah, you're losing 3 guys off your roster, but here you are starting 2-0. You got to like that. And they held Williamston to under 30 points last night, too, on the road.
42-26, yeah.
Yeah, it's only given up 26 to Williamston, so a good start for Okemos. And for DeWitt, I mean, Bryce Kearns, all-time leading scorer for DeWitt basketball voice history. So, yeah, you think he departs the team, you're going to be struggling to begin with. But the coach's son, Adam Flannery, is still on that squad. He's a senior now for him, so he's been on the roster since he's a freshman. So they got the solidify the point guard position for him. They got some big guys down there to help them do the Panthers. They got a win against the St. John's Red Wings last night.
Mm-hmm.
So, a little bit of a surprise for these teams, but not necessarily, more so for Okemos just because of all the players that have transferred out, which is a surprise to me to see guys leaving Okemos. They're been such a good team for a number of years now. But nevertheless, for DeWitt, I'm not as much surprised for the Panthers just because of the guys that were sticking around and graduated yet, and some of the guys that were coming up.
Erik Love joining me on the season premiere of High School Rewind. There were 2 teams that did not play this week. Everett, who did not have a good record last year, but got hot in the state tournament. They actually pulled an upset. They beat Jackson Northwest in round 1 and then very nearly beat Mason in round 2. That was a team that was like 3-21, and yet they were a heck of a lot better than that. And speaking of Mason, well, they didn't play this week either. Probably a smart scheduling decision by Coach Lee Chaney, knowing that figuring in the preseason, before the season started, that they were going to make a long tournament run in football, and they did. They got all the way to the state finals before losing, and knowing a majority of his players also play football, give them an extra week to get reacclimated from football to basketball. I like the scheduling decision in this case. Do you?
Yeah, exactly. You and I touched on this a little bit last night during our broadcast about Mason, knowing ahead of time, realizing coming into it that, hey, man, we got a great football team. We want to get to the state championship. We think that we have the ability to do that. Let's give ourselves a little bit, an extra week since, football season ended Sunday and then basketball season started Tuesday. So they knew that there was a potential that this was going to happen. They could get deep into the playoffs. Let's give these guys an extra week to try and get acclimated to a basketball shape. I know football shape, basketball shape different. I talked about it being, you're still an athlete, you're still in shape, but it's a little different. Obviously, you got to change things up a little bit. But yeah, for Mason, great decision to wait, give themselves a little bit of extra time, get themselves healthy, and hopefully, and then get themselves ready to go for next week. I mean, yeah, you got Caleb Parrish is on the team. He's a good player for the Bulldogs. Luke Marlin is probably their best player. He wasn't on the football team, but nevertheless, you want him to be able to get in sync with his teammates. So, yeah, great decision for them to kind of wait. All right, give us a little more time. Then we'll get out there and play next week. And then for Everett, that was a team. Everett, it seems like no matter what, even if they, 50-50 during the year, 500 record, sometimes they're, a little bit more, they always make playoff runs, depending upon if it's, or they at least find a way to win games in the playoffs because they have got good defense and they got guys that hustle out there. So for Everett, I was a little surprised they didn't play this week. But nevertheless, when they get back to it next week, I'm sure they'll get at it real hard, too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I saw them at the end of the season. They did not have a good record. They were, 3? They were 2-20 entering the state tournament. They played all 22 games, and yet they were like 2 baskets away from playing for a district championship. At the end of the season, that was not a 3-21 team. They were better than that.
No, it's just one of those situations where, they're in ball games, but they just can't find a way to finish ball games.
Well, playing in the CAAC Blue as well.
Well, yeah, it's tough in the Blue, obviously, and playing against East Lansing and Grand Ledge and DeWitt and all those teams.
Waverly.
Nevertheless, yeah, Waverly, Waverly, the champions from last season, the CAAC Blue. So, yeah, they had some close ball games, just couldn't finish things out, and then they found a way to win one in the playoffs, and you're right, nearly upsetting Mason and get to a district title. So, you got to expect Everett to be a little bit better this year. Maybe they'll find a way to finish those close games.
We'll see. On to the CMAC and the other big change to high school basketball in this area, the dissolution of the Greater Lansing Athletic Conference. Now we got teams from that league now in the CMAC. That would be Perry and Lansing Christian. They joined the CMAC. Perry is off to a 2-0 start this season. Lansing Christian 0-1. How do you think that's going to work out for those schools?
Well, it's disappointing, first of all, that the GLAC went away in general. We've had teams that have had to leave that conference that is now gone, and then become, kind of merge into other versions of the other conferences around. But, it helps the CMAC, so that's for sure. They've had some teams leave in recent years.
Fulton.
Yep. And so you're hoping that maybe you go further back. Kerr City Crystal even
Correct.
as well
Yeah.
was part of the CMAC.
Yep.
So I think it helps, though the conference in general kind of strengthens the conference itself, and then it helps these teams get into a more competitive conference. And not that GLAC wasn't. There just wasn't as many teams, and so there wasn't many opponents to face. And then you're stepping up to some other bigger squads. I mean, now you got to play Langsburg. Now you got to play Palumbo Westphalia. Now you got to play Fowler. You got to play the Dansville. You got to play some of these other big squads. Saranac has been good in years, and so is Potterville. So, they're stepping up and playing some good teams. And I think overall, maybe they struggle early on, but it'll help them in the long run.
Well, and it also solves scheduling problems too. When you've got 10 teams, you got 18 league games in 22 regular season games. So it absolutely benefits them as well. Before we finish up here, PW and Langsburg looking strong so far this season. Langsburg was undefeated all the way to the quarterfinals, and they've got Xander Woodruff back on the team. And Palumbo Westphalia, Grady Eklund, he was terrific as a freshman last year. His older brother Jameson is graduated, but Grady looks like he's going to be the best player on that team. And boy, he was terrific last night. 27 points in PW's big win over Saginaw Nouvelle.
Yeah, he led that both teams in scoring with those 27. Another Eklund out there for you. A young squad for PW this year, especially with a sophomore being potentially your best player out there. But nevertheless, they find ways to win. And for Langsburg, if you got a Woodruff on your team, especially if you got Xander, you got a chance. They were fantastic, the Wolfpack last year. New coach this year.
Right.
Nevertheless, still a strong contender for another CMAC title and another deep playoff run.
Yeah, definitely. And that should be a very, very competitive league. Erik Love joining me here on High School Rewind. We're looking at a couple of possibilities for next week. Hazlitt at Mason possibly next Friday, or Langsburg at PW next Wednesday. They're going to play each other coming up next Wednesday. Of course, when you play 22 games and 18 of them are league games, you're playing a lot of league games early on. Another good reason to have more teams in your conference.
Yes, it gives you a little bit more, you can play a little bit more like competition, even if it's in conference, and it just helps things out overall.
And another reason, going back to Mason, going to 22 games allows them to have, and them and other schools, to have holiday tournaments. These 4-team tournaments that happen around the Christmas break, somewhere in that neighborhood. Mason, this will be the second or third year they're having their home holiday tournament. So another thing beneficial there. I think I like the 22-game season. Before I let you go, I like the 22-game season. I've talked to other coaches that would like to see it go to 24 or even more than that. I wouldn't want to see it go to more than 24. Coach Mark Ewell, the executive director of the MHSA, told me they were using 22 games, going to 22 games kind of as a trial just to see how it works, and maybe go to 24 eventually. These kids can play 3 games a week, Erik. They showed that during COVID, and it doesn't adversely affect them.
No, I agree, and I think that I would like to see them go to 24 as well.
I think that would be okay, too. Not much more than that, but 24.
No, 26 would be max, I think, if you're going to go overall. But, yeah, 24 it sounds like a good number to me as well. I love the in-season tournaments. We touched about it last night. East Lansing's playing in 6 in-season tournaments and throughout the rest of the regular season. You get to see different competition. You get to see other schools from around the state. So the more games, the better, to a limit, obviously. And
right.
You're right. The kids can play up to 3 games in a week. And it doesn't really have any, adverse effects to them. They can play like a Tuesday, Friday, Saturday, or whatever it may be, kind of combination out there. But I would love to see 24 games in a season, and I love all these holiday tournaments and these other regular season tournaments going on because you get a little bit more travel and you get to experience other teams. You get to face off with different opponents, and I love teams being able to stick around and face each other in the area, obviously, but it helps them in the long run to travel out to other and face other teams in these tournaments.
Yeah, East Lansing playing in the Jamboree today. These holiday Jamborees where you play 6-7 games in one day. And And speaking of that, Moneyball has their own, going to have their own jamboree 1 week from today at Holt High School. I may have to have Desmond Ferguson on the show next week to promote that. So we'll talk more about that coming up next week. Erik Doc Love, my broadcast partner. Erik, thanks so much for joining me on short notice. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you next week.
Hey, thanks for having me, Brock. I had a good time again. Thanks, dude.
All right. Erik Doc Love joining me here on High School Rewind. Coming up on the other side of this break, we'll talk with Brian Calloway, the prep sports editor of the Lansing State Journal and LSJ.com. This is Doubting Industries' presentation of High School Rewind on the game 730 AM WVFN, and it's brought to you by Jeff and Chris Metz at Doubting Industries, as well as the Lansing Sports Commission.
Get your Detroit Lions pregame fix all season with nachos and kneecaps. The Lansing area's very own local Detroit Lions tailgate show. Presented by Momentum Health Center in Mason. Join yours truly, Beanie from Offensive Minded on the game 7:30 a.m. and Brock Palmbush every week about 2 hours before kickoff. We cover all the Lions angles, player availability, matchups, outrageous Dan Campbell in-game decisions and audio, local ski mask tales, and everything else. Nachos and kneecaps presented by Momentum Health Center in Mason is also brought to you by Miller Lite on Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ and the game 7:30.
Back to the best in sports talk now. We're Lansing's #1 source for sports talk. Touchdown! The game 7:30 a.m.
Welcome back to Doubting Industries' presentation of High School Rewind, the show that recaps the week that was in boys and girls basketball, pretty much exclusively to the boys this week because the girls' season doesn't start until next week. We're now happy to be joined by Brian Calloway, the prep sports editor of the Lansing State Journal, LSJ.com, and now a member of the voting board for the Greater Lansing Area Sports Hall of Fame. Congratulations. Well-deserved, sir.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate it, Brock.
Yeah, your voice very important as far as teams and players that could eventually get into the Greater Lansing Sports Hall of Fame, which I would think in a couple of years' time the great Williamston boys basketball team that won the state title went undefeated 2 years ago. I would think eventually they would be into the Hall of Fame, as well as the two great Sexton teams that Carlton Valentine, or the three great Sexton teams that Carlton Valentine had in the early 2010s, where they went to the state finals 3 years in a row and won two of them.
Yeah, definitely when you kind of think of high school basketball, kind of in the last decade here, I mean, those definitely are some of the teams that stand out. And you look back at that Sexton team, I mean, it was loaded. You had Brent Forbes and Denzel Valentine and Anthony Clemens. I mean, those were three D1 guys. I mean, Anthony Clemens played at Iowa. Brent Forbes and Denzel Valentine, obviously, both played at Michigan State, and both of them appeared to play in the NBA as well, too. So that was just kind of a loaded group that accomplished quite a bit, on the larger scale of things. And you even mentioned that Williamston basketball team. That was a special group that was led by Tom Lewis. And even if you look back, too, that group, the run that East Lansing had those few years with Brandon Johns Jr.
Yeah.
And, that group of players. And even before them, Trevor Manuel and that group of what they did for Lansing Everett when getting them kind of back on the radar after some down years as well, too,
yeah.
when Desmond Ferguson was the leader as well, too. So definitely some very noteworthy basketball teams that we've had here in Greater Lansing over the last decade on the boys' side.
And certainly a couple of them definitely are potentials for the Greater Lansing Area Sports Hall of Fame. All right, let's get to the week that was in boys' basketball. So impressed with East Lansing last night. Took care of Lansing Catholic very easily, 67-15. I was surprised that East Lansing allowed only 15 points. They only allowed 2 field goals in the game. Catholic only had 2 field goals in the game. The rest were free throws. But, excuse me, but East Lansing's speed and their pressure defense was just everything last night.
It really was, and just the athleticism as well, too. I mean, you look at a guy like J.L. Branson, and he was a guy that kind of caught my eye at the end of last season. I remember when I saw East Lansing earlier on in the year, didn't really see much of him, but just kind of seeing what he did when East Lansing made that run to the state quarterfinal last year, and just some of the highlight dunks that he threw down. And I mean, a guy that can just jump out of the gym. So he caught my eye at the end of last year, and then seeing him, what he did to start the season. I mean, 18 points last night. Knocked down some three. Showed the jump shot, but just the athleticism and just the things that he can do was very impressive. And you pair that with Cameron Hudson, who's already, had a pretty good sophomore year. And then, they add KJ Torbert, from Okemos as well, too. I mean, that's already a dangerous team. And we're not even talking about some of the guys that they had that were already on the team from last year that are coming back when you look at guys like, Matt Essel, who was, had a big moment during the state tournament last year. And
Cam Essel, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, he had a big three. I think it was in the regional semifinal game that they had. And that was very key for them winning that game. And then you talk about guys like Charlie Baker and Dunn and, just some of those other pieces as well, too. I mean, they're going to be a very dangerous team this winter. Yeah,
B.J. Wyndham as well. Charlie Baker, hindered by fouls last night, really wasn't that effective. And Christian Dunn, who's got an injury right now, they hope to get him back. If not by Christmas, certainly by the first of the year, and they'll even be stronger with them. Brian Calloway, Prep Sports Editor of the Lansing State Journal. Talked about this with Erik Doc Love. Couple of surprises so far. DeWitt without Bryce Kearns, one of the greatest players ever that's played at DeWitt High School, athlete-wise, because he was a multiple sport athlete, off to a 2-0 start. And Okemos, who lost their two best players, Trevor Smith, who transferred to Bloomfield Hills, Brother Rice, and KJ Torbert, who transferred to East Lansing. Yet Okemos is off to a 2-0 start, and DeWitt without Bryce Kearns, they're off to a 2-0 start as well.
Well, you look at Okemos, they lost another player, Brandon Mercer, who's a sophomore at Holt. That's a pretty darn good player as well, too.
Yep.
So, I mean, really three players that would be starting for them this year. They lost three of those guys, and they're off to a 2-0 start. So, yeah, I mean, that's definitely an impressive start for Okemos, considering all the talent that they had lead the program in the last year. And actually, DeWitt, losing, their all-time leading scorer in Bryce Kearns, and for them to be off to a 2-0 start, that's pretty impressive as well, too. And obviously, I mean, I just think, obviously both of those teams are in the CAAC Blue, and that's just going to be an interesting league to watch. I mean, the Grand Ledge is off to a 2-0 start, mentioning teams when, they lost Teddy Williams, who was an all-state big man for them last year as well, too. So that's another team from that league that's off to a 2-0 start, despite, a very big loss to graduation as well, too. But I just think, the Blues are going to be an interesting league just with all the talent that's in that league. And, I mean, all three of those teams lost some major pieces and are off to decent start so far.
Brian Calloway, Prep Sports Editor of the Lansing State Journal, LSJ.com, joining me here on High School Rewind. CMAC realigned with the departure of the Greater Lansing Athletic Conference. There are several teams that were in that league that are in the CMAC now. That would be Perry and Lansing Christian playing in this league. That gives them 10 league teams. I think it's going to help both the parties, both Perry and Lansing Christian in the long run. They're going to be playing some better competition, and it helps the CMAC as a whole because you got 22 games in the regular season, and now with 10 teams back in the league, 18 of them are conference games. That's beneficial for everybody, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, it does make it easy for scheduling, with 18 of the 22 games, taken care of. Although 18 league games is kind of tough. I mean, it makes it harder for you to get a feel for someone outside of the league and trying to schedule some of those, get a feel from other competition outside your league. So, I mean, I see the plus in that side, but 18 league games is a lot, and that's a lot of your schedule to have occupied, by league play where you're not really getting much of an opportunity to schedule outside of your league and maybe test yourself against somebody else that you might encounter as well, too. So it's almost like you got to, those 4 non-league games you got to strategically use those wisely, I guess, if you're trying to plan out your schedule, especially if you're a team that maybe has some high aspirations and you want to do something in the postseason and you want to kind of get your team a different kind of feel for maybe someone outside of the area or maybe a bigger school or something like that as well, too. There's just limited opportunities to do that. But, from the grand scheme of things, though, for them to, all those teams to have homes. I mean, it obviously strengthens the CMAC and makes it a lot easier for it to survive with, the 10 members now, because obviously they had been losing, I lost Fulton recently to the MSAC. So, and, they've lost some teams here and there over the years as well, too. But it's, definitely big for the CMAC to have the strength that it does with being 10 teams now.
Interesting thought process why you would want to go to fewer conference games. Yeah, how many times do we see CMAC teams not play anybody outside their conference until the regional tournament? That does happen an awful lot. We see it in football quite a bit, and we do see it in basketball as well. Brian Calloway, Prep Sports Editor of the Lansing State Journal. All right, talked about this with Erik Love. We talked about it last night during our game and talked about it just a few minutes ago. The foul rule, adopted by the National Federation of High Schools and adopted by the MHSAA. 5 fouls per quarter. No more 1-and-1s. It goes to the women's college basketball rule and the rule that's similar to the NBA. When you get to the 5th foul, you're in the bonus or the penalty. And it's 2 free throws. No more 1-and-1s. Your thoughts so far?
Well, the first time I saw this was on Tuesday night. I was watching some of the JV game between Holt and Sexton, and I thought that the rule just kind of made things drag in that game from what I saw, just because I felt like, the game was extended just because I felt like there was a lot of fouls called and then there's a lot of stoppage and play for free throws and whatnot. I mean, I believe the purpose of the rule, they think that it will speed up the game. I think that's kind of the grander idea of the game. From what I saw on Tuesday, it didn't seem that way. But, hey, I've only seen, we're only here in the first week of the season.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to kind of see, how things play out. But it's definitely interesting rule to get adjusted to as well, too, because obviously it resets after every quarter as well, too. I think it's one of those things that you'll have to give time to kind of see the impact that it makes. Just the first time I saw it during that JV game, it kind of made things drag, but I didn't really notice an impact of it, much last night or even in the varsity game that between Holt and Sexton later on that night as well, too. So I think it's just one of those rules that will be interesting to kind of follow to see how it goes throughout the course of the winter.
Yeah, Brian, I wanted to mention all the games on Tuesday. Man, we had 4 or 5 overtime games. In the game you were at, Sexton at Holt, if I was not under the weather, I would have been to that game. Man, lots of close games on opening night. That could be, hopefully, that's a harbinger of good things to come around the Mid-Michigan area. A lot of competitive teams, a lot of competitive games.
Yeah, it definitely could be. And, there's a lot of good talent in this area right now as well, too. I think, especially when you look at that sophomore class of kids, when you look at a guy like Keyshawn Somerville from Sexton, you look at Braden James from Grand Ledge, KJ Torbert at East Lansing, Brandon Mercer from Holt. I think this sophomore class is a pretty talented class of guys, and then you add in some of those other guys. I didn't even mention Grady Eklund from Palmer, Australia as well, too.
He had a big game last night.
Yeah, he did. So, I think the sophomore class is very talented around the area here. And I think that also is something that will be interesting to bear out and will lead to some quality basketball in this area as well, too. We mentioned the sophomore class, and then you got some juniors that are making noise as well, too. Cameron Hudson, who we both saw last night, J.L. Branson as well, too, we saw last night that are in that junior class as well, too. So I think there's some decent talent, amongst the underclass players in the area, which also is something that will, make the basketball scene interesting.
Yes, it will. And, just a couple of games today. East Lansing, we saw last night, take care of Lansing Catholic. They head to the Detroit area to play West Bloomfield tonight. They play at 8 o'clock tonight, so they're playing back-to-back to start the season. And Grand Ledge trying to get to 3-0. They're playing Freeland this afternoon in the finals of the Petoskey tournament. And Erik and I talked about this last thing before I let you go. The advantage of going to 22 games, it allows these schools to play in holiday tournaments around Christmas time. Mason, for example, restarted a holiday tournament they hadn't done for a while because of 22 games. They're allowed to play, these 4-team tournaments that they play around Christmas time. Absolutely beneficial for a lot of schools. I know Stockbridge has a holiday tournament or has had in the past, and again Mason as well. A big time advantage going to 22 games, and I would advocate going to 24. Before I let you go, what do you think about that?
Yeah, 22 games. As I just touched on with the CMAC, imagine if there was only a 20-game schedule and they were playing the 18 league games as well, too.
Which used to be that way. It used to be that way, Brian.
Yeah, which is, you really wouldn't have any opportunities to schedule outside of your league. But, no, I definitely liked the 22 games that they added last year. I think a lot of coaches liked it as well, too, just because of the opportunity it afforded them to maybe schedule someone they normally wouldn't schedule to see a different kind of team. Or, like you said, to play in a tournament like Mason had last year, or where other programs have had as well too, to be able to have a holiday tournament, or to have some other kind of tournament, or even what we're going to see next Saturday with the Moneyball Classic at Holt High School, where you're going to have a whole bunch of games back to back to back to back, and a lot of good teams playing each other in that as well too. If their schedule is 20 games, you might not be able to fit something like that into your schedule, but now teams are able to do things like that. So it's definitely a positive for 22 games regular seasons now.
He's Brian Calloway, the prep sports editor of the Lansing State Journal, LSJ.com. Brian, thanks so much for coming on. We'll talk to you next week. Same time, same station.
All right, Brock. Thanks for having me.
Brian Calloway, prep sports editor of the Lansing State Journal, LSJ.com. As we close this edition of High School Rewind, we got a busy day of sports coming up today on the Lansing Sports Network group of stations, Town Square Media. Coming up here on WVFN, the Detroit Pistons are playing tonight, 6:35 pregame. They're playing, Cleveland Cavaliers are playing them tonight at Little Caesars Arena, trying to break that long losing streak that they have. 15 games? 16 games? 16-game losing streak. That's coming up here on WVFN. And then later on tonight, 1240 WJIM, it is Detroit Red Wings hockey as they are in Montreal playing their original 6 rivals, the Montreal Canadiens. Before we get out of here, I want to tell you about our great sponsors. Dowding Industries' presentation of high school basketball and of High School Rewind is brought to you by the Lansing Sports Commission. No matter the sport, the Lansing Sports Commission can make your next event your best event. Plan on something greater. Find out more at lansingsports.org. And by Jeff and Chris Metz and Dowding Industries. If you're wondering what your future holds and you're not going to college, or you found out college is not for you, check out the future that skilled trades can offer you. You'll be surprised. Check them out at dowdingindustries.com. Thanks to Erik Doc Love. Thanks to Brian Calloway for joining me on the show today. We'll be back next week, same time, same station, 10 a.m. until 11 every Saturday throughout the season until the end of March. We'll have a game next week as well. It'll either be Wednesday, Lanesburg at PW, or Friday night, Hazlitt at Mason. We'll let you know early next week what game we're going to do. Thanks to them for joining. Thanks to you for listening. You've been listening to Dowding Industries' presentation of High School Rewind on the game 730 AM WVFN and the Lansing Sports Network. We'll talk to you next week. The Sports Life is next.